Chapter 13 Anatomy of the Vitreous, page number 444 from Wolff's Anatomy 8th edition. Gross appearance of the vitreous. The vitreous humor is a transparent colorless gel of a consistency somewhat firmer than egg white. It fills the posterior 4/5 of the globe and is in contact with the retina behind and the ciliary body, zonule and lens in front. The vitreous body is roughly spherical but is flattened anteriorly. It exhibits a curve-shaped anterior depression, the patellar fossa, which accommodates the lens and is separated from it by the capillary space of Berger. At the margin of the patellar fossa, the vitreous is adherent to the lens capsule over a ring-shaped zone, the ligamentum Hyalocapsular of Wiegers, 8 to 9 mm in diameter. Although anatomic fusion of this tissue has not been demonstrated, the union is strong in youth. By the 6th decade, however, it becomes sufficiently weak to permit intracapsular extraction of the lens without pulling on the anterior face of the vitreous. This site also receives the insertion of the hyaloid portion of the zonule. Outside the ring of attachment, the vitreous is intimately opposed to the ciliary processes, which indent its anterior face, or to the fibers of the ciliary zonule. The hyaloid Canal of Cloquet runs from the post-lenticulus face of Berger, from a point slightly nasal to the posterior of the lens, to the funnel-shaped space, that is the area of Martegiani in front of the optic disc. The canal is 1 to 2 mm wide and runs a sinuous course from lens to disc. It represents the sites of the primary vitreous and the fetal hyaloid artery. Its walls are formed by condensation of vitreous. Multilayered fenestrated structures have been found in Cloquet's canal in adult human and primate eyes and have been thought to represent the sheaths of the media of the embryonic hyaloid artery and its branches. The multilamellar structure of the sheath may contribute to its visibility during slit lamp examination. Occasional cells are found within the canal and a network of fine collagen outside it. Eisner believes that the hyaloid canal of prenatal life disappears completely after birth and is replaced by a retrolental tract that develops anteriorly in the first 4 years of life and extends posteriorly in adolescence. Histological studies of vitreous structure in the 18th and 19th centuries provided 4 different hypotheses: the alveolar theory, the lamellar theory, the radial sector theory, and the fibrillar theory. In 1849, Bowman claimed that these descriptions were incorrect due to fixative artifacts, although introduction of the slit lamp biomicroscope enabled in situ observation of the vitreous. An equal variety of descriptions followed. Goldstein in 1912 described membranes, Kippe 1970 saw fibers, and Frittenwood and Steeler in 1935 observed concentric sheets. Eisner, using slit lamp microscopy in both living and dead eyes with special conditions of illumination, has proposed the following account. At both, vitreous structure is homogeneous and shows a finely striated pattern. At this stage, a denser outer cortex and an inner central vitreous are not established. Here and there, narrow transvitreal channels of lower density traverse its substance from the periphery. These overlap the optic disc, fovea, and retinal vessels, and presumably reflect variations in vitreous synthesis during the growth of the eye. The shape of these channels is altered according at different vitreous depths. Such channels are also found in relation to congenital or experimentally induced retinal anomalies. From infancy into adult life, the homogeneous structure of the vitreous changes with a decrease in density of the central vitreous, while the cortex retains its relatively high density. Formation of the cortical vitreous starts anteriorly and proceeds posteriorly, and the posterior vitreous is the last to lose its infantile striations. It is of interest that there is a marked interspecies variation in vitreous density. In dogs and cats, the central vitreous has the highest density. In cattle and sheep, the vitreous is homogeneous, while in the horse, the entire vitreous is of low density. The second postnatal development, also beginning anteriorly, is the formation of the so-called vitreous tracts, fine sheet-like condensation of vitreous structure, which radiate backward into the vitreous space from defined points on the circumference of the ciliary body and the anterior retina. Figures 13.6 to 13.9. It is these tracts which give rise to the concentric onion skin arrangement of the adult vitreous. The vitreous tract arise as follows. Retrolental tract. The retrolental tract is inserted into a circular zone on the lens capsule near the Hyalocapsular ligament and extends posteriorly into the central vitreous. It is conspicuous as a highly reflecting boundary, the membrana plicata of Wolff. Coronary tract. The coronary tract passes backwards into the central vitreous from a circular zone overlying the posterior third of the ciliary processes, the coronary ligament. It is of variable density and fairly indistinct optically. Median tract. The median tract is inserted into a circular zone at the anterior margin of the vitreous space, about the middle of the pars plana, which is termed the median ligament. The tract extends backwards as a faint veil into the central vitreous. Preretinal tract. The preretinal tract is inserted at the ora serrata and is more strongly reflecting than the preceding two. These tracts show the gentle curvature in younger eyes, which gradually becomes more sinuous and extensive with aging. The precise configuration depending on the effects of gravity. Also starting in adolescence, a process of liquefaction and fibrillar degeneration of the vitreous occurs, which also breaks up the basic pattern of the tracts. The tractus preretinalis is least affected by these changes using dark field slit microscopy in fresh unfixed human vitreous. Sebag and Balaz, I don't know the pronunciation, Sebag and Balaz, these two names, have shown that the homogeneous appearance persists in childhood apart from the visibility of Cloquet's canal. By middle age, macroscopic fibers appear which traverse the vitreous in an anterior-posterior direction and insert into the vitreous base both anterior and posterior to the ora serrata. At the posterior pole, the fibers appear oriented towards the macula. Now Figure 13.1. Eye of a 9-month-old human from which the sclera, choroid and retina have been dissected. The posterior extent of the vitreous base is seen as a grey band at the ora serrata. Figure 13.2. Intraocular spaces. 1. Posterior part of Cloquet's canal, that is space of Martegiani. I think it's Martegiani or Giani, I don't know. Martegiani, Martegiani. I'll see later on the pronunciation, but right now I'm pronouncing it as space of Martegiani. 2. Mid portion, 3. Anterior portion, 4. Secondary vitreous, 5. Berger space, exaggerated, 6. Canal of Petit, 7. Hyalo-orbicular space, Garnier space, 8. Canal of Hannover, 9. Aretus onular, 10. Hyalocapsular space, 11. Anterior chamber. So these are the spaces in and around the vitreous. So this is the Cloquet's canal. You can see the one is the posterior part of the Cloquet's canal, that is the space of Martegiani. So this space of Martegiani, it is the funnel-shaped part that overlies the optic disc. Okay, and it is the posterior part of the Cloquet's canal. Anteriorly, it is continuous with the Cloquet's canal. Cloquet's canal, it is nothing but the hilar artery remnant. So that was about the Cloquet's canal. That was about the space of Martegiani. One is space of Martegiani, two is Cloquet's canal, mid portion of the Cloquet's canal. Then anterior portion. Anteriorly, actually, it continues into the Berger space. Okay. 4 is secondary vitreous. 5 is Berger space. Berger space is what? What is patellar fossa? So vitreous has, this is the vitreous, it has got the anterior part. This anterior part is depressed to accommodate the lens, and it accommodates the lens. And that depression is called as patellar fossa. Its margin is thickened where the vitreous is thickened. It is called as Hyalocapsular ligament or ligament of Wiegers, W-I-E-G-E-R. Okay. And then there is a lens, and in between the lens and this fossa here, patellar fossa, there is a space, capillary space, that is called as Berger space. Okay. And then Berger space, then it continues posteriorly. Actually, it's not continuous. There is an anterior hyaloid phase. Then posteriorly, it continues beyond the anterior hyaloid phase as Cloquet's canal. Okay. Now we have seen the Canal of Petit. Canal of Petit between the post-equatorial or posterior zonular fibers and hyaloid zonules, that is the Canal of Petit, and Canal of Hannover between the pre-equatorial and post-equatorial, that is anterior and the posterior zonular fibers, that is the Canal of Petit, that is divided by the equatorial fibers into two parts. So Hyalo-orbicualaris space between the hyaloid zonules and pars orbicularis part of the zonule. Actually, the text is not given. I didn't find any text regarding the hyalo-orbicular space. If there is any, if I find further later in this chapter or the next chapter, I'll comment about that thing. But right now, my logic is it is between the hyaloid zonule and the pars orbicularis. Okay. So that is called as hyalo-orbicular space. Is also known as space of Garnier. 9 is iridozonular space. Iridozonular space. Anterior iris, posterior anterior zonule. That is the iridozonular space. Then 10 is iridocapsular. Iridocapsular between the iris, posterior surface of the iris, and anterior surface of the lens capsule. Then 11 is anterior chamber, that we know between the corneal endothelium and the posterior surface of the iris and the anterior surface of the lens capsule. So that was about the vitreous, the Cloquet's canal and different spaces and canals, Canal of Petit, hyaloid canal, patellar fossa, Berger space. Okay. Hyalocapsular ligament, Wiegers ligament, Canal of Petit, Canal of Hannover. It is all about it. So next is figure 13.3. The relations of the vitreous in the anterior eye, the ora serrata 1, is the termination of the retina. The vitreous base 2 extends forwards for about 2 mm over the ciliary body and posteriorly about 4 mm over the peripheral retina. Collagen in this region is oriented at right angle to the surface of the retina and ciliary body. Anteriorly over the pars plana, it has a more parallel orientation to the inner surface of the ciliary body. The posterior hyaloid 4 is continuous with the retina and anterior hyaloid 3. And with the zonules and lens, ligamentum hyalocapsular is at 5 and the space of Berger at 6. Figure 13.4. Dark field horizontal optical section of vitreous in a 33-week gestational age human. Anterior segment is below and posterior pole is above. Hyaloid artery remnant is seen coursing towards the prepapillary vitreous cortex. Dark field horizontal optical section of vitreous in figure 13.5. Now this is figure 13.5. Dark field horizontal optical section of vitreous in a 4-year-old human. Dissolution of the walls of the hyaloid artery is noted. Light scattering in the central vitreous arises from Cloquet's canal. Figure 13.6. Growth and aging of the vitreous, a late stage of fetal life. The hyaloid artery extends from disc to lens, surrounded by a transparent material within a channel to delineate it from the definitive vitreous by a membrane-like condensation, intravitreal limiting membrane of Gianni or Digiani. I think it is Diani. Then B is infant. The hilar artery and intravitreal limiting membrane have disappeared. The definitive vitreous shows a regular finely striated pattern. Infantile striation radiation. C. Adolescent vitreous tract begin to develop in the anterior vitreous. The posterior vitreous still shows the infantile striation. D. Adult vitreous tracts extend into the posterior vitreous. E. Senile restriction of the framework. Development of liquefied cavities interspersed with irregular strands. F. Senile posterior vitreous detachment. Distal vitreous empties through a gap into the retrovitreal space. The vitreous collapses. Figure 13.7. Growth and aging of the vitreous. Optical dissection of autopsy eyes in the Hyalocapsular. A premature infant at the 32nd week of pregnancy, the hyaloid artery and its retrolateral ramifications, as well as the remnants of Berger papilla, are still present. The structure of the remaining vitreous is homogeneous. Child aged 7 months. Only tiny remnants of the hyaloid artery remain. There is a prepapillary channel of even width traversing the vitreous. The other vitreous structures show a homogeneous finely striated pattern. There are no vitreous tracts. C. Adolescent aged 14 years. In the anterior vitreous, the cortex is delineated from the more transparent vitreous center. Vitreous tracts appear. The adult 70 years of age. The vitreous tracts nearly reach the posterior pole. They now follow a typical S-shaped course, descending first behind the lens, ascending then in the center of the cavity, descending finally towards the disc. E. Early vitreous destruction in an adult, 31 years of age. At several points, cavities develop, some of them in the anterior zone of the adult pattern, some in the posterior vitreous of the infantile striation. F. Posterior vitreous detachment in an adult of about 75 years of age. The vitreous has collapsed. Coarse strands pass from the intravitreal into the retrovitreal space. Figure 13.8. Topographic subdivisions of the vitreous space. 1. Pre-retinal zone, bounded on the outer side by the retina. 2. Intermediate zone, bounded anteriorly by the epicelial portion of the anterior hyaloid membrane and by the ciliary epithelium of the posterior pars plana, ciliary vitreous space. 3. Retrolental zone, bounded anteriorly by the patellar fossa of the lens. The intermediate zone is delineated from the retrolental zone by the retrolental or hyaloid tract tear. From the preretinal zone by the preretinal tract TP. So TR is retrolateral tract, that is third. Second is TP. TP is preretinal tract. Okay, so the vitreous tracts, these are of 4 types: retrolental tract, coronary tract, then median tract, and preretinal tract. So retrolental tract, it extends from the circular zone on the lens capsule near the Hyalocapsular ligament, that is the ligament of Wiegers, posteriorly into the central vitreous. Okay, so that is the retrolental tract from the Hyalocapsular ligament. The coronary tract arises from the posterior third of ciliary processes. It passes backwards into the central vitreous. Median tract. Median tract, it is from the middle of the pars plana, and again it extends backwards into the central vitreous. Okay. That is, it is inserted into a circular zone of the anterior margin of the vitreous space about the middle of the pars plana. It is termed as a median ligament. Okay, and retrolental tract, that is the first tract we mentioned here. The retrolental tract, it is conspicuous as a highly reflecting boundary. Okay, and that is also known as membrana plicator of Wolff, the OGT, membrana plicator of Wolff, retrolental tract, Wolff membrane. Then coronary tract, median tract, and pre-retinal tract. Now, pre-retinal tract, it is inserted at the ora serrata and is more strongly reflecting than the preceding two. So, first is retrolental tract. Retrolental, coronary, median, and pre-retinal. Now, retrolental tract from the hyalocapsular ligament, that is the patellar fossa margin, it extends posteriorly to the central vitreous. Second is coronary tract, that arises from the posterior third of the ciliary process. It passes backwards into the central vitreous. There is the coronary tract. Retrolental tract, first tract, it is also known as the membrana plicata of Wolff. Then median tract. Third tract is median tract. It arises from the middle of the pars plana, and anteriorly it is inserted into the circular zone of the anterior margin of the vitreous space. Anterior margin of the vitreous space, that is the middle of the pars plana, it passes backwards into the central vitreous. Then pre-retinal tract from the ora serrata. Okay. So that was about the tracts of the vitreous. Figure 13.9. Schema of vitreous tracts in human eyes. TR tractus retrolentis hyaloideus. Inserting at the retrolental ligament LR. TC tractus coronarius. Inserting at the ligamentum coronarium LC. TM tractus medianus. Inserting at the ligamentum medianum LM. TP tractus preretinalis. Inserting at the ora serrata. It's the same thing that we discussed just before this. Figure 13.10, dark field horizontal optical section of an 8-year-old woman, showing the absence of fibrous structure even though vitreous is seen extruding out of the hole in the premacular vitreous cortex above. Figure 13.11, dark field sagittal optical section of vitreous structure near demonstrating prominent vitreous fibers coursing in an anterior-posterior direction and oriented towards the premacular hole. Fibers inserting into the vitreous space are also seen. So, the next video will be on the microscopic structure of the vitreous, and that includes the vitreous cortex, central vitreous, and vitreous cells. The vitreous cortex, it is anterior hyaloid, posterior hyaloid, vitreous base, and peripapillary and perimacular attachments. We'll discuss these four things under the heading of cortex. So, microscopic structure of vitreous is divided into three parts: cortex, central vitreous, and vitreous cells. So, enough for today. Thank you for listening to me patiently. Goodbye. Take care. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness.